Hello and welcome to another A Nerdy Journey podcast episode, the podcast where we talk to filmmakers about their journeys into the entertainment industry. I'm your host, AK Moore, and my guest today is multi-hyphenate non-union editor and post-production coordinator, Chloe Bellande, who's had the pleasure to work on multiple shows for Netflix and HBO Max. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you on, and I know you have an incredibly busy schedule. You're always jumping between not only a lot of different shows, but also a lot of different independent projects that you take on. Yeah. And I have so many questions that I want to talk to you about all of them. But before we get into the stuff that you're currently working on, I'd love to know a little bit about what got you into the industry to begin with. What made you want to become a filmmaker and more so get into the post side?
That's a very, very good question, but it's going to have to, do we have time?
Take as much time as you need. You have such an interesting story, especially coming from Canada. Yes. I would love to know even, what was the appeal of coming to Los Angeles specifically to work in film?
Well, there's no winter except in Big Bear, so that's the first one. But I would say, honestly, I've always, and that's going to come as a surprise for people who don't really know me since I was young, but I've always been a writer, actually. When I was 12, I came up with a script, and if I read it today, it would make no sense. But I thought I had written a script, right? And I was more of a writer. I thought I was going to be a playwright at that time. I really loved Broadway. I thought I was going to end up in New York somewhere. But when I moved here, which it's a whole story about how I got a green card even to move here. At that point, I realized that it was between New York and LA. Those are my two options. And I knew that the industry was mostly based in LA when it comes to shows and features and all that. And I made that decision at the very last minute. I was just, maybe a month away from moving here. And I decided it was going to be LA. I don't know. I flipped a coin and I said, what?
You made the decision a month before? Like if you were going to New York or LA, you didn't know?
Yeah, I just didn't know. I had my goodbye party, I remember, at my mom's house. And it was a whole green card party. And at that point, I knew I was looking at my options of different friends I could stay with, for the first few months when I moved. I have a lot of friends in New York as well. I have a whole relationship with New York. I've done projects in New York and all that, but I've never done anything in LA specifically. So I figured, I draw a list of pros and cons. And I figured if I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to some place that is completely different than where I come from. Because New York is still on the East Coast, and where I am, I'm from Montreal, Canada. And it's part of our subculture. I mean, it's something we do all the time to spend weekends in New York, especially when we have a long weekend or Labor Day, and we just go shopping there. So it's something that's too common, too close to home. And I figured, I'm just going to go all the way and never return. And I did that. And that was the first step. But then before that, I had to apply for a green card. And the one that I applied for, which is, by the way, not easy to get. I don't want anybody to think that it's just you just, snap your fingers and you get a green card. It takes a long time, and then you got to qualify for a lot of different criterias. And it's called the what is it called again?
Oh, fortunately, I have not had to deal with that. But based on a lot of the people who I work with who have had to go through the immigration process, some of whom are still working on getting their green card, even though they've been working here, they've had the work visa for a while and they're trying to get the official green card. It sounds like an absolute nightmare based on what everybody has told me, and expensive. Quite expensive.
Yeah, immigration is an absolute nightmare. And you're right. Most people usually start with, for everybody listening to us who are from another country and they're interested in moving here and working in film, most people do start with the O1, which is a work visa in the film industry. A lot of people start with that for acting or for writing, or they just come here. However, that requires you to have a sponsorship from a job. So you can't just apply for the visa. You do have to have a sponsorship. What I did is the opposite. I actually went right. I shot for what is it? What is the expression again? You shoot for the fans.
Shoot for the stars.
Shoot for the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I say the fence because it was like supposed to fail, but it didn't.
Well, I'm glad it didn't.
It did, exactly. It was the Extraordinary Abilities green card. And that one, when my immigration lawyer spoke to me, he said, there's like a 99% chance of failure. Do you have a plan B? And I did my whole like Elle Woods, and I'm like, there is no plan B. There's only plan A. I'm going to Harvard. So then anyway, I was like, I'm going for that. So I applied, got the green card. There's a whole chapter about that we're going to skip just for time purposes. And yeah, when I got here, I made the choice of coming here instead of New York, and I have no regrets. I really feel like this is the city for me. I've come to, after a while, after understanding really the lifestyle of LA and how people, operate here, I prefer the West Coast now to the East Coast. And I really like how my journey went from there.
As somebody who was potentially looking at doing New York or LA, what you said one of your decision-making processes was you didn't want it to be kind of like where you had grown up. Was there any other decisions that went into that about like why you specifically wanted to do LA film industry versus New York? Because they are fairly different and some of the types of stuff that shoots here versus there. And also, I assume post-production work is also fairly different here versus there. Was there any other job market reasons for wanting to do LA? Or was it truly just the weather is lovely?
Yeah, it was mainly about the weather, but it's not just that. It's also the experience of working on film and television, and also asking around in different groups on the social media, and asking the pros and cons that people that have lived in both cities. Actors, I know a lot of actors who've lived in both. They're like bi-coastal, and that's good for them because then they can have like, different contracts. They can expand their network. But for post-production, now that I look back at this, it's really better to come in LA specifically because you have a lot more shows that are based out of here. Not that they're shooting here, but they're based out of here for the post-production side of things. All the studios are in LA, basically. Yes, you do have a couple of studios over there in New York, but the bulk of the work is really here. And that's why I feel like I made the right decision in the long run.
Yeah. And when you were in the process of deciding to come out to LA, did you feel like, or did you already know at that point that post is where you wanted to end up?
No, and that's actually the fun part of it because I really came here to be a writer-director. I was pursuing my childhood dream of being a writer. And things started changing when I realized that it's not as easy as we think. When you don't really have a platform, you don't really have a support system or not even an idea of where to start. There's no job leads. So basically, yeah, bless you. There's no job leads when you come here in any way possible, not even in post-production, but also even less as a writer. So basically when you move to a new place and then you don't I started doing what everybody does when they're coming from somewhere else. I had scripts that I was submitting to competitions. I was going to film festivals. I was mingling. I was networking. And that takes you only as far as a certain point where you do get some good contacts out of it. You get some knowledge about how the industry works, but you never really get a job unless you are represented. And at that point, I really went far with that. It's writing has been something that I've really given all my heart to. And then at that point, I got really exhausted and tired of always having to work and hustle, but never getting anything back. So at that point, so there was a point right before the pandemic, I would say maybe 2018, that I really started to edit. Because editing has always also been one of my passions since I was young. And it's also another form of storytelling. So I realized, well, maybe I just love storytelling in the end. So it doesn't matter what form it takes, whether it's writing or editing, I'm still a storyteller and I can still feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose by being an editor. So I started by being an indie editor. For those who don't know what it is, it's really just that you're non-union. So you don't work on those big studio production. You work on commercials, branded content, short films, feature film that are independently financed. So then basically this is all jobs that you get from direct contacts from networking. I don't think there is a clear path to do that. I think that you really have to look on the social media. There's a couple of websites there where there's job posts. And then I started, that's how I started like getting to know people. It's mostly based on relationships and networking. And so that's what I did in the beginning. That's what I started doing. I would say around 2018, I started more seriously editing as a job, as a second income. I had a little job on the side. I was actually a customer service agent for StubHub.
Oh man, I am so sorry. I've done something similar where I was on the customer service side of a large company, and getting those phone calls can be very draining. But also very inspiring if you're a writer, I have to say, because boy, did I have some great phone calls in there, and some great stories.
Too. I don't know if it will be a good script, but I got some stories. Of course.
Did you go to college for filmmaking at all before you came out to the US? Or did you basically graduate high school and say, I'm starting my film career now, I'm not going to go into college debt?
No. So in Canada, we have a different system. So we have high school, and then we have 2 years of prep school, which it's basically like college, but it's not the level of college. So it's like you have to pick a major that will prepare you for classes that are basically general knowledge, and then you go to college with this. And you have to have good grades. You have to have like letter of recommendation, which is helping you get in the major that you want in college or university. So I did get into college, not the college that you guys think, but the 2 years of prep school. I did get the degree in arts and creative arts, which I did screenwriting, I did editing, I did all sorts of like film related classes. And that's when I knew that I had to be either an editor or writer. So that's where my passion came from. But then when I got to university, I got rejected to the film program. I reapplied in different ways, trying to change my major. I tried different ways to get in the program and never got in. And so when I got my final rejection letter 4 years into university, when I was trying to do a different major just to get my parents off my back, really.
Boy. Having parents and the film industry do not mix. They really don't.
It's not a job, right?
No, it's not a job.
So that's why, so while I was 4 years into my bachelor's degree, which is like bachelor's of arts still, it's not really anything. When I did that, at the end, when I got my final rejection letter, I don't know why, it kind of gave me a boost of confidence. I feel like, you know what, I'm going to still make it. And that's where I started saying, you know what, I'm going to go around and figure out my way, how to learning how to make movies. I'm going to go to workshops. I'm going to go on the internet. I'm going to figure out how to make a movie, how to write a script. And then that year that I graduated from my school, I was actually at Concordia University in Montreal. So that year I graduated, I produced and directed my first feature film, which is super indie, like zero budget, really.
I mean, regardless, that's impressive nonetheless. Even if the film doesn't turn out to the level you want it to, being able to say that you made a feature film at that age is truly incredible.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you.
That's a lot. I don't think I was ready at that age.
I mean, you gotta throw yourself in the fire at some point. You gotta do it.
I agree entirely. I throw myself into multiple fires weekly.
Oh, yeah. But the thing is, like, nobody actually gives you that opportunity, because, like, I thought that my first step was to go to school in film and then get a job and an internship, because that was a clear path that everybody had talked about back in Canada, that this is obvious that you just have to go to school, get an internship, then get a job. But because I didn't get the school part, then I had to be creative and figure out another way to still make things happen. And when I started submitting that feature film to different film festivals, two of them, which I think one of them was the New York Film, one was related to the New York Film Academy, but it was in New York.
Wow.
The other one was in LA. And then, but they were really independent film festivals. So basically I went, and that was my very first time that I went to LA to present a movie at a festival. I love the experience. I love the networking part of it. My cast, my actors also came with me. Everybody had stars in their eyes. Like, oh my God, we're in Hollywood. We thought we made it, right? We didn't really, but like we thought we made it at that point. And it was our first baby, our first movie. But that was the beginning of a series of other movies that I wrote and directed when I was back in Canada. And then that gave me I knew at that point that this is what I have to do. That's how I learned, basically.
Yeah.
But if I had to give an advice to people who want to start from scratch to be a filmmaker, I would say it's still important for you to go to those workshops. If you can get the bachelor's degree, or if you can go to any sort of film school, do it, because you're going to learn the way to do it, the structure of how to make a movie, how to write a screenplay. And it's really important. It's going to help you in the future. It's going to save you a lot of money. A lot of money from the movies you've done that you know now not to do these things, how not to do it.
Yeah. Well, so what you brought up is very interesting, and it's a different take from a lot of what some of the other people I've had on have mentioned about college, which is it's the safe environment to really fuck around, truly. Like, you can basically, there are consequences, obviously. If you're doing an action film, you need to do it safely, but it's low risk, because if you don't end up getting the shot that you need, it's not for a multi-million-dollar movie that's going to now lose millions. It's a very safe environment to play and learn and truly see, okay, I wrote this script. Wait, why didn't that play with an audience very well? So you write another one that's similar. You're like, oh, this worked better this time than it did this time. And you kind of, you build a lot of skills that way, which is one of the purposes, I guess, of doing shorts to begin with. And I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, which was just because, or making a short film, your end goal should not be getting it into a big film festival and then getting the feature made. Because if that's your end goal, it's very, very unlikely. I'm not saying you shouldn't try. I'm just saying that you shouldn't have that be the driving reason behind making a short film. It should be just literally playing around with the medium and seeing, is my story working? What parts of my craft can I hone in on with this new short? And if it places well in film festivals, that's a bonus on top of the skills and experience.
I actually 1000% agree with you, because that was also one of the advice I wanted to give people. I feel like the mistake that we all make, and myself included when I first started. Exactly. I really thought that, let's go do a feature. We're going to meet I don't know, whoever, and then he's going to buy my script. And it's not how it worked. And I don't want to break anybody's dreams. I don't want to tell you that this is not going to work, because you might be an exception to the rule.
Absolutely.
But also, if you live your life thinking you're always the exception, it's not good. You might have a lot of disappointments in the end. I just prefer living my life knowing what's the rule. And if something else happens, then that'll be the exception. But really, I'm just going to play by the rules. And what I was going to say, which is what you already said, basically just start by doing your own shorts and learn which part of the industry you prefer to go in. Because once you move here, you're going to realize, and that's something that it just hit me in the head, and I just didn't realize it was going to be that way. It's that when you're in Montreal, when you're in a small town where it's not a town where the film industry is big, like LA, for example. It's not everywhere in the world is LA, right? But if you're in another town, you're in Michigan, you're in Minnesota, Montreal, whatever. And so you're making movies, everybody in the industry, you'll notice that when you network with actors, with directors, with writers, and then some people are wearing multiple hats on the set, because there aren't jobs for everybody. So everybody's doing a little bit of everything, right? But when you move to LA, you got to be so specific to what you want to do, because one person is going in post and he's going to go all the way down, all the way up in post. And then another person is an actor, and he could be just an actor and director, or just an actor and a casting director. And it goes like you pick one field and then you go all the way in that field. Yeah. Otherwise, you waste your time networking in other fields that is not leading you to anything. And so when you could have really used that time and money to just work on your craft, right? The one that you want to pursue, mainly. So I would say that that's the one thing. When you do short films, the one thing I learned by doing all my I think I did 4 or 5. Maybe I'm missing one, but I did 5 movies in total. And then all those movies, each one is better than the previous one, because then I would apply the things that I would learn. I would make one mistake and be like, next time we have to put more money into lighting. Lighting is important.
Yes.
Per night with no budget, So you learn a little aspect of it, and then you learn what you don't like about filmmaking. I know I don't like the lighting. I don't like doing all of that. I prefer to have a film set and hire people who know what they're doing, right?
Mhm.
I prefer the producing side of things, or maybe the directing side of things. So you just have to choose what your path is, and then you dive in it once you get in LA, because that's going to really be helpful if you specialize in one thing and if you learn that this is what you want to do. That's my advice, basically.
Oh, I mean, I think that is terrific advice. So we had another person who was a story producer and has been a story producer for like the last 30 years out here, and that was one of his big takeaways as well, which is you kind of are siloed. And if you start to work up, he used what he called the skyscraper analogy. If you start on the bottom of one skyscraper and you start to go up, you can't easily go to another skyscraper. But you've mentioned a few different interesting things, and I want to hone in on one first because it's kind of more at the beginning of your journey, which I still feel like we're at the moment. You moved out here initially to write and direct.
Yes.
How long was it before you decided you wanted to make the switch to post?
I moved out there in 2016. And then, but at that point, I had been writing and directing for 8 years already in Canada.
Okay.
So that's when I moved. I already almost 10 years into writing, directing. So I was already exhausted, and I was like, this is my last chance. That's it. LA better work out.
Yeah.
And it did. So in 2018 is when I really started taking more seriously this freelance editing. At that point, I figured I had that day job I mentioned. I was like a customer service agent, but then it really helped because it was job from home. So I was able to easily, I had a flexible schedule. So I was able to, go out, mingle, get some contracts, and then start as an editor from home. And then, little by little, I had like a bigger table, an edit bay, and I started really gearing up to become an editor. So that's what happened. So basically, I would say like maybe the first 2 years, I immediately switched into post. And from that journey, actually, came a beautiful thing, because during the pandemic in 2020, at that point, it had been 2 years since I had been doing some contracts, little things here and there with editing. I tried to apply to the union, the editors, because like when you want to be an editor on TV shows and studio production, you do have to be part of the union. So I applied, and I also saw online that there was like an ad. They were advertising that they were looking for post coordinators as well. And HBO at the time was offering a program, a training online for us who want to be a post coordinator.
Wow.
So basically,
you lucked out. Wow. Do they still do that training?
Yeah, it still exists. I was going to mention that actually. Yeah. But basically, so that training came in the same summer that I had applied for the union. And at the time during the pandemic, there was like a long wait, maybe a couple of months to even get an answer from the union. So when I got the letter from the union, they were saying that the credits, the things I had submitted, basically the projects, were not considered projects that were union eligible. So I wasn't able to get in the editors union. But at the same time, in the same month, I also got accepted and approved to go to the training program with HBO for post coordinator. So I figured, well, you know what? At some point, I'm going to start listening to the universe, because this is a sign.
Oh, that's an awesome sign.
So that's what happened.
That's incredible. And so you spent 2 years out here trying the writing and directing thing, and then started to make the shift to do more indie projects on the side as an editor. And you keep mentioning you did a bunch of networking and stuff to land some of these first jobs as an editor. How did you find a lot of these networking events and stuff? What have you found to work best for you when it comes to that way? Because, I mean, based on everything you're saying, it sounds like you were a networking fiend, and I feel like I can learn a bunch from what you're already talking about.
Yeah. Oh, no, networking. And for everyone who knows me back in Canada, networking has always been my strength. I always I spend hours on the internet every night. We're always like on our phones before we go to bed. I don't
know what you're talking about.
No, right? Right. Ask your eye doctor; he'll tell you, right? Basically, yeah. So I just, sorry, that's my dog, by the way, Dinah.
Oh, what a cutie!
Yeah, my assistant, right? So every night I would always look. I don't spend hours. I'm exaggerating. I just spent a few minutes, and I look online. I always look on Eventbrite, on Facebook. Sometimes there's posts on Instagram. Montourage is a good one for Instagram. Basically, they always have industry related events for different parts of the industry. It could be acting, it could be editing, it could be showrunners. And Armand, who's the person who's running that page on Instagram, he always brings in like special like guest speakers. And sometimes within those networking events, you meet people that will give you information about another workshop you haven't heard about. And I feel like people shouldn't be approaching networking as I'm going to go to this party and meet someone who's going to book me a job. You have to approach it as I'm going to go to this party, talk to people, and get information. And then with that information, you go and look for jobs. So basically, if you go with no expectation and you're just there to have a good time and talk to people, you not only make good contacts, but you also make good friends. All my friends now are people I met through networking. My best friends now that I've been, talking to all those years. And all the jobs I've had, all the contacts I've made through, those networking events, those are the ones who referred me to job. It was always word of mouth. One person, they would be like, I need somebody to edit my short film. Fine, I'll do it. And you start always with like super low pay gigs. That's how you start because you just need to build your reel, right? Your editing reel. So I started with super low pays. I started offering my services on Facebook. Say, hey, I'm available. Anybody needs like a movie trailer for the movie you're doing right now or something. I'll just do a couple ones for free. Then I run out of free stuff and that's it, right? So you start for free. You start doing a couple ones, but then you impress them. You do a really good job. And then from there, once you have a couple ones that you can show as your reel, when you go to events, now you're no longer someone who just started. You're someone who already has a couple of projects. They don't have to know that you did them for free. They just need to see the project and be like, this is a level you're at. Perfect. You're hired, right? So that's how you start. You really start small. You really go around not with no expectations. And that's how you start booking gigs. And in my case, it was always word of mouth. Like I would finish a movie, for example, for a client, and then they would say, hey, I have a friend who's now doing a movie. And that's the danger. You say yes to that because it leads you to other projects. But if you quote a rate to one friend and then they refer to another friend, they're going to say what rate you quote them. So if you don't want to stay in the same circles, you also have to continue networking and not just rely on the word of mouth. That's another trick I'm giving you. But honestly, that's been the case for me. It's always been through networking.
That's absolutely incredible. And it's funny enough, I actually went to a very early Montourage event. It was, I think he had just recently started it or something before the pandemic. I had gone to one and it was a lot of fun and I just kind of fell off the train. So I think thank you for reminding me. I need to get back on. I follow him on Instagram and everything. So I need to absolutely go to those again. And obviously, you mentioned that at his events, he's always bringing in industry professionals to talk and stuff. And a lot of them are panel type events. Not all of them are parties. How do you approach the people who are on the panel when you go to those? How do you, introduce yourself and not just come off as somebody who's desperately seeking a job?
You have to research. Usually in those events, ahead of time who's coming to speak. I would just recommend to research them because sometimes I cross spot with people that I'm like, oh my God, what's the show again? And you don't know what to say. You don't know how to approach them. And then I just don't talk to them at all because I don't want to look stupid. But like I would say, just research them first and see what shows they've worked on or what movies they've done, or read their bios. Sometimes there's somebody just like you who were like an independent filmmaker in another country, and then they move here, and then you learn facts about them. Don't sound like a stalker when you approach them and be like, hey, I know you're from Montreal, Canada. That's like a little too much. I would just say keep like a balance where you're just, hey, I'm Chloe. By the way, I read I saw the movie you did last, and then I'm really impressed with such and such aspect of it. Do you have any other project you're working on? So just bring up something they've done and bring up a question about the future. And then they will feel like you're interested, and then they'll be like, yes, let's start this conversation. Because you have to think about the way that you also want to be approached as a person. Like, how would you want people to talk to you? Do you want them to come at you and look for a job? Nobody wants that, right? It seems like you're solicited, right?
Yes.
So it's better to just go and have just a simple conversation and always just ask for advice. Don't ask for anything. Don't ask for a job. Don't ask for a favor or here's my resume. Can I send you my resume? Don't even say that. Just ask for advice. You say, look, I've been looking for jobs and I've been looking to work for people exactly like you in your field. I was just wondering if you had any advice on how I could proceed or places I should apply to. And then sometimes it comes from them. If they like you, if they feel like they can relate to what you say, most of the time they'll be nice enough and they'll be like, okay, hey, just here's my email or, send me your resume or can I find you on LinkedIn or something like that. Mm-hmm. But you never ask for a favor. You always ask for advice.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good advice. That, and I guess I need to stop opening with reciting their address back to them. I guess that's a little off-putting. Right. A little stalker. So, okay, I think that's all terrific advice for networking, because it's so crucial to, like you said, expanding who you know and just trying to promote yourself and get yourself out there more. And we're all, at the end of the day, scared little people who are still trying to get work. No matter, I feel like, how high level you go up, you're always going to have that. You always want to meet the next generation of talented people so you can all continue working together.
However, the only thing I will add to that if we're in the topic of networking is that sometimes a job can also come from someone you've already worked with on another independent film, and never underestimate. I have a story about that. I was working on a feature film and I really wanted to be an editor. That was at the time between 2018, 2020 that I was really going on film sets with the idea that I wanted to one day be an editor. But what happened is that I didn't get, it was somebody who knew somebody that I was living with, a roommate at the time. And he's like, you know what, come with me on set. They probably need a PA. Mm-hmm. And that was really a lucky accident. And sorry, serendipity, because the original PAs that worked on set, they were allergic to cats and they were filming in a house where they had cats.
Oh boy.
I'll do it. I'm not allergic. So I got the job just based off of the fact that I'm not allergic to cats. So it's referral, right?
Oh my God. That is the most incredible way to get a job. Hey, why are you here? I'm not allergic to cats. Terrific.
Yeah. So, but it went out so fast because my former roommate was a DIT on that film set. Mm-hmm. And then they were asking around, does anybody know a PA who's not allergic to cat that can come in tomorrow morning? I'm like, I'll do it. So I drop everything, I go work on that film set. And then I ended up becoming friends with the woman who worked in the wardrobe department. And long story short, we're friends, we're talking. Once we wrapped the feature, we stayed friends outside of that. And then she goes, hey, Chloe, by the way, I have a friend who's doing a short film this weekend. It's not a paid job. It's really just 2 days. It's just a weekend. It's just going to be a couple of scenes as he's doing a proof of concept. But since you mentioned that you wanted to be an assistant editor, I put you on as an assistant editor if you won the job. Like, you know what? I'll do it. It's free, but I'll just do it. Whatever. Yeah. So you never know who these people know. And that's the thing. So I went in, I did the job. It was a short film. I had a great experience working on that film set and going back home and learning how to be an assistant editor for the first time with professional crew. Mm-hmm. And so the director who I worked with on this short film then goes, Chloe, you know what? Usually I don't have the budget to pay people on this film set. This was supposed to be a passion project of mine. But what I usually do when somebody does a good job is I thank them by giving them another job, which is a paid job at that point. And that's how it works, right? You give to the next one. And so he goes, next week, I'm booked on an assistant editor gig for NBC Universal. But if you want, I can put you instead.
Oh my God.
And
that's incredible.
Yes. So the next week, I was working on World of Dance with Jennifer Lopez, literally for a whole week. And not on set. I mean, it was like a post-production office, but the fact that I had the chance to work on one episode, it doesn't matter if it's a segment, an episode, I was just, oh my God, this came from 3 movies ago from someone from the wardrobe department. And also because I'm not allergic to cats. So basically, but that's actually really what happened. So that's one of the advice I'm giving to people. Never underestimate the jobs. You never know who these people know. Everybody in Hollywood is always at least 6 degrees of separation from someone who works on a film set. And if you make a good impression, if they like you, you see, I didn't ask for anything. I just went there and figured, you know what, I'll do it for free. I just want the credit. I just want to learn. And then from that volunteer job came a paid job And then that was the beginning of like other things that I did.
What's funny is I also have my current job because of somebody who I met who does wardrobe. So clearly, everybody out there, you need to network with wardrobe people. They know everybody. And if they like you, you are in. So network with wardrobe.
That's so true.
Yeah. So obviously, another big thing in 2020 is you edited a feature. That was 2020, right? Or was that 2021? As Certain as Death, you and I met on that set.
Yes.
And was that like your first like indie feature that you had edited at that point? Or was that like, yeah, tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I've done other projects before that, but that were it's other projects that were low budget. So yes, I've done some shorts and I did maybe one indie feature in the past. But never one that had this stellar cast that we had, and one that had distribution. Like this one, As Certain as Death, it was my first time working with an all professional crew and nobody cut corners. It was really well done. And I was happy to work with Hutch Dano. Honestly, he's a good director and actor. So I loved working with him behind the scenes and working on like, making the scenes better and then making the story better. He had advice, I had advice. He was also letting me be creative in my editing. And so in terms of storytelling, that was one of my best work, because not only did I did the feature, I also did the trailer. And I think it's one of my best trailers so far.
That trailer is awesome. I'm going to link it below because that is a great trailer. It's a great trailer.
I discovered one thing with that movie, and then also movies I've done in the past. I love scaring people in movies. That's one thing that I think it's an art, because you can either really fall flat and be like, okay, that was really bad, nobody's scared of that. Or it's just the way you edit. There's that frame thing. It's just the one thing you do and people are jumping off their seats and then, they're on the edge the whole time. So I feel like this was my strength. I know now I'm really a horror movie editor. If I have to do it again, that's what I would do. I love horror movies.
Well, if you want an easy way to, scare people as an editor, I feel like it's to say that you lost all the footage, really. But that's that. If you want to see terror in somebody's eyes, tell the director that you lost the footage. Please don't do that. That will literally give somebody a heart attack.
There was a point, and that's, if you remember very well, there was a point on that film set where we could have lost the footage to a bear that came on set. So
we could have lost a little bit more than just the footage with a bear. I hope I can get Hutch on here. I know I'll get Bree on at some point, one of the producers, but I hope to be able to get Hutch, the director and lead actor, on here at some point soon, along with Daniel and a bunch of everybody else on that crew who is just incredible and has great stories to talk about how they broke in. And so when you came on set, you had your entire editing cart. Which, it was basically, I guess it was your DIT on set cart. When you started to make that switch over to editing, you mentioned that you started to build up an editing bay and stuff like that. What do you feel like is the crucial equipment or skills that people who want to get onto the more editing side of post should start to accumulate?
I think it's important to have at least a second monitor. Because it can really hurt your eyes. When you start editing and you're always looking at one screen, you just want to extend that sequence, whatever software you're using, if it's Premiere, if it's Avid, you do want to extend it and use a second monitor. I would say that. And also use a bigger monitor, not just the 17 inches, like try to get a bigger one, because it's going to hurt your eyes. And also the other thing, that's one thing I would recommend. The other thing is like what I ordered recently. Those are the what they call the Blu-ray.
Oh, the blue light filtering glasses.
Blue light filter. Yeah, I don't know if it actually works, but I've been using them like lately, because like those late nights when you're editing and with the light and all, it's not always good for your eyes. So that's another thing that I would say, to prevent, whatever, the eye fatigue.
And that's a cheap way to start, I guess, helping your editing health. I guess also probably a good chair would be worth it.
Yeah, no, that too. The chair is very important. It can't be a cheap chair. It has to be one that you really feel comfortable sitting on, that you have like, you can just put it up or down and then you can just lay back. It really has to be, what did you call it? Ergonomic chairs?
Ergonomics, yeah.
So basically you need a second monitor, you need a bigger monitor, not a little laptop. I mean, I could do, if I'm just doing like a short commercial, and then I've done that at some point. I was like flying back to Canada for the holiday, and a friend of mine calls me. He's like, "Oh yeah, I sent you the footage." I'm like, "Oh my God, I thought this was going to be like after the holiday." So I did it on my flight. So I kind of edited something for him on my flight, and then I went home, I sent it to him. I landed and I sent it to him. And at that point, he's like, "Chloe, that's great." And then it just went on, like it was posted the same night. And I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's cool." But I don't recommend doing that because the laptop is really small. It hurts your eyes. It's something you would do if it's a really short project that you could do a couple of hours. But it's immediately annoying, immediately. So I would say get yourself a bigger computer screen, a desktop, get a second monitor, get a great chair, and that's the basic, I would say. If you want to get a third monitor, that's up to you, because a lot of people do that as well. Mm-hmm. But I would say the basic would be the second monitor.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Everything that I do has to be 2 monitors. Once you go up in monitors, you can't go back down. Your brain's like, I need more space.
Yeah, and then a big table. I mean, depending on where you live, if you can afford the space, you can have like a bigger table. Yeah. So I had one of the IKEA, like they have long tables. It's really not expensive, so you can get that one, and then to be more organized, to have more space. So that's what I would recommend. Just prepare your space to work, and make sure there's not too many things in your around you, in your way, because you just want to be comfortable. And when you're editing, be prepared to spend hours on that chair and that desk. I mean, you're going to be there for hours overnight sometimes, because you want to get that scene perfect, and that little thing, it's not working, or that transition's not working. So I get frustrated sometimes with myself, and then I'm like, no. I tell the client, you know what? It's not ready. Wait another week. And it's ready, but it's just because I'm a perfectionist and I really need to finish that one little part, right?
Yeah.
But as long as it doesn't sit well with me, I don't care who likes it. I have to like it first, and then I show it. Yeah. So I would say in terms of equipment, just do that, just to avoid, to be comfortable, to have a space that's more like your creative space, and that you don't feel like you're restrained by your screen size or any other thing. So.
That absolutely makes sense. You mentioned everything that I've already accumulated, because I learned the same things, especially during COVID. I want to go back a little bit to where you're currently at, or how you got to where you're currently at now, which is like post coordinating and post supervising. Yes. So you took a class, or you took an HBO program. Mm-hmm. I guess. That's something that you mentioned that they are still currently offering. Are there other programs like that in the industry as well?
So the post coordinator program came from HBO, but it's actually it's the Warner Brother Discovery that is owned, like they own HBO Max. Yeah. So basically, they were offering that. It started back in 2020. I think I was the second cohort to get in. And then ever since that time, they started having at least 2 cohorts a year. So then they have their website, you can apply, and then it's very selective. There's like 3 rounds of interviews. I think that for each cohort, they get something between 12 to 14 students, because it's like a live class. It's not an online class where you could just do at your own pace. You have like an instructor, a teacher, and then they really show you the ropes through an actual show. So for example, when I did the post coordinator class, we were learning through, I don't know, for example, Julia, for example. And then they would show us a season that's already passed and aired. So then they would just go and show us all the documents, all like in detail what a post coordinator does when they work on a show. And I learned so much, because I would have never known any of that if it wasn't for that training with HBO. And from there, they also introduce you when you graduate, quote unquote, graduate, basically. Yeah. They either do an in-person or a Zoom party where they introduce you to post producers that are looking for post coordinators. And so far, I have to say, literally all the jobs that I've got for the past 4 years have been from people who met me 4 years ago at that Zoom party. And wow. I still get calls from someone like, "Oh yeah, I got your resume 3 years ago." I'm like, "Oh, okay, you're still there." I mean, yeah. And then they hire you, because like everybody, at first it started more like something that nobody really has heard of, and it's all word of mouth. Now a lot of post producers have heard of that program, And then sometimes they just go on that roster, and that's where we would get hired from.
And that's incredible that you're still getting job offers from something that you did many
Yeah.
years ago, not just like the ones that you're connections that you're actively making through it. So yeah, that's a huge dichotomy between post-production coordinator and editor. And
Yes.
I guess between the two of those, you mentioned that you love editing horror. What would you say is your end goal? What are you working towards at the moment?
I First of all, I'm really glad that I got to be a writer director back in Canada for 8 years, because all those movies, they really taught me how to make movies. And I really know, like I said before, I know exactly what I don't want to do and I want to do. And with all my experiences of the past and knowing the different bits and parts of the industry, the inner workings of that, I know I want to go, I want to keep moving up as a post producer. Right now, I think 2 years ago, I took a workshop, basically the same training that I took with HBO Max. It was now offered for post supervisor, and they were specifically selecting people who are already working so that they're ready to move to the next level of their careers. Yeah. So I got selected for that one too. And I'm currently in the process of moving up as a post supervisor. So that's the next step. And then once I do that, it's going to be another process then to move up as a producer. That's going to be another one. But I mean, that's my ultimate goal. I feel like I've really observed what my post producers have done on the last shows. One in particular on Julia, season 2 with HBO Max, Sean, he was really a mentor to me. And he's someone who has worked on so many other shows as well. And the way he tackles and approaches not just issues, but challenges in the post world is something that I'm aspiring to be. So I figured that, I just, that's what I want to do. I want to be a post producer. And I know that with the lifestyle that comes with it, there's a lot more flexibility because you also work a lot from home. I'm not saying you're not busy. You're super busy, very. But I mean, now that everything seems to be a lot of work from home and a lot of work is remote, you have a lot more flexibility with that too. So this is really what I'm trying to do. And editing will always be something I do as a hobby and for fun. And in between jobs, like sometimes I don't book a show for a couple of months and then, I go back to editing, or sometimes I edit on the weekends, but it's always going to be something I do on the side because I enjoy doing it.
No, I think it's very healthy to always have hobbies on the side, even if those hobbies are still related to your careir.
Yes.
I think that's healthy. At least I do it. Maybe it's not healthy. Maybe it's maybe not. Either way, we're coming to the end of our time. Is there any other tips that you'd want to tell people? Is there anything that maybe was unexpected to you that you feel like other people should know as they're breaking in? Any other last thoughts?
Last thoughts. I think that if we're talking about lifestyle if we're on the topic of the lifestyle, I think it's also important to go outside, because when you are working from home, like I do on different TV shows, and then I also edit on the side. Basically, those are all jobs that you do at your desk at your house, right? Or if you work in office, that would be in an office, but you never get to see the sun. So I just feel like if you're going to be living in LA, I would recommend to also have a lifestyle where you do outdoor activities. And it's a beautiful city to do that. Like I go hiking on the weekends all the time. I have my dog. I take my dog to the beach. I love to do road trips and discover different places in California. There's a lot of wine tasting. There's a lot of vineyards. I mean, there's so many things to do, and you never know. You never know who you're going to meet. I'm not saying to go out there and then, expect to meet people in Hollywood. I'm just saying that if you just put yourself out there and do other activities, it'll come naturally and organically to you. That's my best advice.
I have found the same thing on my end as well. Just have hobbies that you're passionate about, and you're going to meet other filmmakers who are passionate about those hobbies, and you're going to start to work together.
Yes, because people also want to meet you in other circumstances. They don't always want to meet you in a networking event, right?
Yeah.
There are some places where we just do. Sometimes I do group hikes, and then all the people I invite, everybody has to bring someone that I never met, and then we all do a group and we go hiking. Yeah, and then the whole hike is always at least an hour and a half or 2 hours. And then what do you do when you hike? You talk. So everybody talks about what they do, and then we're hiking. We're talking about the difficulty of hiking because where you go. But at the end of the day, we all come together for one activity. So it creates a bond that you wouldn't have if it was just somebody you met over a drink at the bar at this networking event. So try to do more activities, try to go outside and do fun things. I think it's always beneficial for that.
I'm in LA for a lot of the same reasons. It is a gorgeous city to do everything you just mentioned.
Yes.
And I think that is a great last piece of advice to end on. Well, Chloe, thank you so much for you and your cute little pup joining us today. How can people find you online?
They can find me on Instagram. My handle is Chloe Bells, like, bells on Bells with 2 underscores after the S. And we have also my LinkedIn, which is my full name, Chloe Bellande. So I would just encourage people to add me on both if you want.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here. If you are interested in going into post at all, go ahead and add Chloe. And hopefully between her busy schedules of both networking and working on incredibly large shows, she'll be able to have time to respond. That's the one thing that I've also taken to heart is sometimes people are just busy. If they don't respond, it's truly not necessarily malicious. They might just be busy.
Yes. That is true.
And, even to my friends, I feel like all of us will text each other and then sometimes 3 days go by and then you realize you haven't texted them back because
I still respond to all my texts, but I see what you
No, like there have been times if I ever make the mistake of opening the text and not responding right there, that's a very dangerous proposition.
Then you forget it because it gets piled up in the other text.
Exactly. No, if I see something come in and I try not to read it or if I don't have time to respond to it, just because, otherwise I will forget and then it gets buried. But nonetheless, Chloe, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you and getting to talk about this. And, hopefully in a future episode, I can have you and several other post people on and we can have a nice little fun post forum at some point where we can talk about all things post-production and share not only just stories, but things that we found that helps make our jobs better and easier. Because boy, is it a crazy world out there. As you mentioned, it's global, a lot of what our jobs are.
Yes, it is. Yeah. But it's a crazy world. It's a jungle. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't have it any other way. So
yes, I agree. Well, thank you for joining and thank you all for listening and or watching. This has been a Nerdy Journey podcast. You can find us on Nerdy Journey, basically on every social media platform. And don't forget to give us a like and a follow, and I will see you on the next one.